Today I'm going to talk about an issue that I know is important to everybody, and that's the future of our food. Would you believe me if I told you I can point to a hidden source of food that can feed 4 billion more people? 4 billion more people. That's enough to feed everybody who suffers from hunger today. That's enough to feed our growing population through 2050. And would you believe me if I told you that hidden source of food saves enough CO2 emissions, enough carbon emissions, to remove every car off of every road every year? And would you believe me if I told you that hidden source of food saves enough water to fill the water needs of the entire continent of Africa? Now, what is this hidden source of food? Is it some type of freak science? Is it something from outer space? No. It's hiding in plain sight. Because this hidden source of food is the food that we waste each and every day. And the problem's about to get a whole lot worse. Because we live on a planet of 7 billion people today. And a little more than half of us live in cities. But in just 35 years, we're going to grow our population another 35%. And at that point in 2050, nearly 70% of everybody on the planet will live in cities, meaning people are moving farther and farther away from their food sources. So let's talk about food. And any conversation about food has to start with a conversation about farming. Farming is the largest human endeavor on Earth. We literally move more land, we literally alter the face of the planet through farming than we do anything else. And in fact, farming uses 38% of our ice-free land. For comparison, if you took all the cities of the world and you put them together, they use 2% of our ice-free land. So we use a lot of land to farm, and I'm going to show you we use a lot of resources. And the ugly, ugly truth is we throw away 40% of our food. 40% of our food never makes it from the farm to our fork. You could think about it this way. We grow and produce enough food on this planet to feed 10 billion people. We live on a planet of 7 billion people, and only about 6 billion people are getting enough food. That 40% inefficiency represents the food that we lose or throw away every day. And I challenge all of you to think about where else in society do we tolerate 40% inefficiency in anything. Think about today if we only got 60% of our emails. A lot of us might be relieved about that. But in reality, if we only got 60% of our emails, our modern society couldn't function. Banks couldn't work. Trading systems couldn't operate. Businesses couldn't open. The fact is, we don't tolerate 40% inefficiency in anything. Yet, we have come to accept 40% inefficiency with the major resource to sustain the human race, which is our food. So every year, we're creating this mountain of waste, 1.3 billion metric tons. If you think that an elephant weighs 1 metric ton, think about 1.3 billion happy elephants standing in one pile. That's the amount of waste we generate every year. So let's take a look at the types of food we waste, the food waste types, and this is data from the United Nations. So the UN tells us that the #1 category of food that's wasted are cereals, grains and cereals, excluding beer, by the way, because apparently we waste no beer, according to the United Nations. But if you look at the next 5 categories, vegetables, fruits, excluding wine, according to the United Nations, to be fair for the wine drinkers, milk and eggs, meat, fish and seafood. They represent greater than 50% of all the food that's lost or wasted on the planet. They represent the majority of where all our vitamins and nutrients and minerals come in our food supply. And they represent the most delicate and perishable of food types that we have. We have to waste less food to feed more people because we live on a hungry planet. Tonight alone, 1 in 9 people will go to bed hungry. That's the equivalent population of the entire United States of America, the entire European Union, that will go to bed hungry. And there's another tragedy. Because 2 billion people on the planet, 2 billion people on the planet suffer from hidden hunger. It's a third of the planet. These are people who are getting enough food, but not necessarily the right foods to be the most productive in society. They're not getting the vitamins, the minerals, the nutrients they need to be the most productive because those are the food types that are lost first because they're most delicate. So where do we waste our food? Well, 37%, about 1/3, happens at the consumer level. That's where we buy too much and we throw it away, and that's a problem we have in the United States. But 2/3 of all the food that's lost or wasted on the planet happens at the production and distribution level. This is where food rots in open-air markets or it rots in poor transportation networks. Altogether, it creates a big carbon footprint. According to the United Nations, the carbon footprint of the food that we lose and waste every year is 3.6 billion metric tons of CO2, carbon emissions. So what is that? That's fuel for tractors. That's electricity for water pumps where we grow our food. That's diesel fuel to move our food on our roads. Take it all together, it's 3.6 billion metric tons of CO2. It's a big number. In fact, if you measured food waste as a country, it would be the world's 3rd largest emitter of greenhouse gases. So there's a big carbon impact, but there's a big water impact as well. Let's start with the oceans. The oceans cover 71% of our planet, but we get just 2% of our food from the oceans. So as we think about feeding our growing population, the oceans become a logical place to look for new food sources. But here's the perverse carbon cycle at work. I told you food waste has a big carbon footprint with CO2 emissions. Where does that CO2 go? Well, what we read about every day is the CO2 goes up into the atmosphere, creates the greenhouse effect, which is trapping heat and causing global warming, causing climate change. And all that's true. But did you know that about 1/3 of our carbon emissions are absorbed by the oceans? And over the last 200 years, the rising level of CO2 in the oceans is raising the level of acids in the oceans by 26%. It's killing off the basic building blocks of life in the ocean. It's killing off the small plankton that are eaten by the small shrimp, that are eaten by the small fish, that are eaten by the bigger fish that we want to eat. So we need a lower carbon future, not only for the health of the climate, but for the health of our oceans. And while we're talking about water, let's talk about fresh water. Of all the water on the planet, just 1.3% is fresh water that we have access to. We take 70% of that to grow our food, and then we throw 40% of our food away. Wasted food is wasted water. We can measure it at all levels. At the global level, the irrigated water we use to grow the food that we throw away is greater than the irrigated water used by any country on the planet. We can measure it at the individual level. I've done this. I'm sure some of you have too. You buy a head of broccoli. You lose it in the back of the refrigerator. It goes bad. You have to throw it away. Well, when we throw away a single head of broccoli, we flush away 5.4 gallons of water that it takes to grow a single head of broccoli. There's a great organization that's just formed in the United States called ReFed that has done a deep dive analysis of food waste issues in the United States. They have a report they published last year, and it paints a tremendous mental image of the food waste issue in the United States. They say that if we wanted to create a farm, if we wanted to plant a farm to grow the food that we throw away in the United States, we would need 3/4 of the land mass of California. And then think about this. If we wanted to water that farm, we would need all the water, and I mean all the water, of California, Texas, and Ohio to water the farm, to grow the food that we throw away. So what needs to change? Well, we have to address this issue systematically at all levels. For the 2/3 of food waste that happens at the production and distribution level, we have to work with our national governments, we have to work with our international agencies to really tackle that issue in emerging economies. But for the 1/3 of food waste that happens at the consumer level, we can all start now. We can all start now. So I want to leave with 3 simple things that we can do to all lower the food waste at the consumer level. The first is we should shop with a plan and not shop with our eyes. Before I became familiar with this issue, I would shop with my eyes, and that's only natural. Food is beautiful. You go into the supermarket, and the first aisle you go into is the fruits and vegetables aisle, and it's beautiful. So the food looked great. I'd pick it up, and I'd put it in my cart, and I'd move along, and the food looks great. I'd pick it up, and I'd put it in my cart, and before you know it, my cart would look like this. And I would pack it up and bring it home, and then realize, oh, I'm traveling this week for work. My wife has an after-work dinner meeting. My kids have soccer practice, and they're eating at a friend's house. And we would throw the food away. So today, I shop with a plan. If I don't have a plan for the item that's in my hand, it does not go into the cart. Second simple thing, we have to accept that not all fruits and vegetables are produced uniformly by nature. We have this romantic notion about what our food should look like, that every apple should be perfectly round, and every carrot should be perfectly straight, and every potato should be perfectly oblong. Well, guess what? Nature doesn't produce it that way. So what happens to the potato that looks like this? We have to love it too. We have to love it too because it is equally nutritious and it is equally delicious. And then finally, at some point in time, we all face a meal like this. There is no shame in bringing it home and enjoying it a second time, or in this case, maybe your 3rd or 4th time. We have to love the doggy bag too. The consequences of food waste are anything but foolish. But I can tell you, the way we systematically waste our food in the face of climate change, in the face of hunger, in the face of water shortages, has got to be one of the most foolish things we do in our society. But despite these challenges, I'm very optimistic. I'm optimistic because almost anything we do on this issue is going to make a big difference. And I'm optimistic that working together, we truly can uncover the hidden source of food that can sustainably feed our planet. Thank you.